Hello and welcome to Unstress Health. My name is Dr. Ron Ehrlich. Now, we've looked at brain function, brain fitness, mental fitness. We've talked about meditation and mindfulness on many occasions, but today we're taking a slightly different and high-tech approach to this very issue of brain fitness. My guest today is Dr. 𝗵𝗁𝗏 𝗏𝗏, PhD, and Patrick is an award-winning author, an educator, a consultant, and an entrepreneur with over 3 decades of experience in brain fitness, personal empowerment, and light sound brainwave entertainment technology. Now, he's the founder of BrainTap technology, a company dedicated to harnessing the brainwave entrainment through guided audio, light, and sound to help people relax, reboot their nervous systems, improve their sleep clarity, and overall brain performance. Now, Patrick shares an interesting statistic of science research of over 40,000 people that have done meditation and looking at their brainwave activity to come to the conclusion that maybe everybody who thinks they are meditating are not achieving the brainwave benefits that they ideally should be if you are doing meditation as it should be done. Now, Patrick blends neurotechnology, meditation, performance science to help individuals and organizations shift from overload, dysregulation, and burnout, a subject we've covered many times on this podcast, into states of clarity, balance, and high performance. I hope you enjoy this conversation I had with Dr. 𝗵𝗁𝗏 𝗏𝗏. Welcome to the show, Patrick.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Patrick, I know you talk about brain fitness, and I know a lot of people hear it. It's a catchy phrase. It's one I guess we all aspire to. But why are we all getting it wrong?
Well, I think a lot of people think it's just about physical fitness, and they don't realize that the brain can learn. Our neural pathways either are shutting down or we're growing them. There's 3 things that the listener should be concerned with. One is when we were born, Ron, our brain was actually fully wired and we had 18.1 volts. But as we age, by the time we're 21, that averages 10.1 volts. In our study we did for Alzheimer's and dementia, we found that as soon as somebody's brain got to 7 volts, they started having dementia symptoms. 4, they started having Alzheimer's. And so there are exercises you can do, and we can talk about them today. We'll talk about what they are, some simple things they can do from home. And it's a little adjustment to your diet because you cannot think a bad diet. That's part of brain fitness. You got to move and breathe because the body is designed, movement is life. And the reason we have such big brains as compared to other mammals is because we're balancing all the time and we're walking and doing these things, but our lifestyle today is sedentary. And then we need to do some kind of brain fitness, which involves whether it's meditation, relaxation, BrainTap, breathing techniques. We'll talk all about those things on the show too. And what I'm saying is that 3 times a day, you should be thinking about your brain. And we'll go into why that's important because it's not about meditation. Meditation does not evolve your brain. We've proven that in our labs. Meditation, actually, out of 30,000 brains I've scanned in the last 10 years, I've only met 4 people that meditate well and actually improve their brain function. Only 4 out of 30,000. And
wow, that's a show-stopping comment there, Patrick. Yeah. That's a big one. Let me
tell you why that is. We have something called the default mode network, or some people call it the reticular activating system. This is a part of our brain in the amygdala that when we start to get into fear. So let's imagine for a moment, you're closing your eyes to meditate and you haven't been trained by anybody. You just want to start doing mindfulness training. Because I'm not talking about gurus and people like that. I'm talking about everyday people that think they're meditating. And so the minute you close your eyes, what happens is we know that 30% of your brain is going to go offline because it's controlled by our sight, our vision. Our vision controls most of our brain function because that's our first receptors in what's going on in the world around us. So as soon as we close our eyes, now what usually happens when we close our eyes, of course, is we go to sleep. We first make sure we're in a safe place. We're okay. We go to sleep. But most people, 2/3 of the world isn't sleeping right. So what we're talking about is they're activating a system of their body that doesn't function correctly in the first place. Now they're asking it to meditate. Now, when your amygdala gets hijacked, which means your primitive brain, that reptilian brain gets hijacked, you're not going to be thinking good thoughts. The average person out there, and I'm sorry, listeners, but the average person has 60,000 thoughts a day, and 80 to 90% of them are negative. And it's not because they're negative by nature. We are the byproducts of a bunch of paranoid ancestors. We're here because they didn't fall off a cliff, get eaten by a lion. They were very paranoid, but the same threats and the same challenges they had are not the same we have today. So we have social media, we have phones, we have traffic, we have screens, all these things. And our biological system does not know the difference. So when we close our eyes, all that fear is now going to come to the foreground. Now, if you don't know how to handle that, then your brain will become overwhelmed and you actually stress out your brain through meditation. And that's what we show. Most people are not doing it correctly. Now, if you add in some breath work, which we'll talk about a little later in the show, maybe how they can regulate their brain through breath work, and you figure out that you are supposed to be thinking when you meditate. A lot of people they shit all over themselves because they think they shouldn't be thinking. And the reality is the only time you don't think is when you're dead. So you have to think of thoughts like a river. They're going to flow. You have to direct those thoughts in where they go. So you can do that by retraining the brain. And that's why in our core process is what I've developed. I've written 10 books, my new book, Brain Fitness Blueprint, but I have a book called Discover the Language of the Mind, where it's also a blueprint on how we change our thinking. Because most people have never been taught how to think. They've only been taught what to think. And there is a big difference in that. And, those are the people that turn on the news to find out what they should know and not know. And I always tell people, if the listeners out there too happy, your life's just going too well, I know exactly how to solve that. You just turn on the news and you'll be miserable within 5 minutes. Because our life, the world that we live in, unfortunately, is all designed around paranoia, fear tactics, stress, and getting us to, as herd mentality, to run away from our pleasures to whatever they're going to sell us. It's not that they're evil. They're trying to make money. So they use these strategies to motivate us to spend our money and our time. So when I talk about that, so meditation, the first probably 2 months of meditation is just learning how to think in the disassociative state because you've not been trained. And that's what we do with my technology, Brain Fitness. In the BrainTap technologies, we teach people how to think differently. It's not about meditation. Meditate. Now, if you have a guru and you're meditating and you're getting good results, I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about the average person that thinks they go on YouTube and learn to meditate.
Oh, no, Patrick, please. You're talking about here the business model of the Western world.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
This is what we are up against, really, isn't it? Engaging fear, fear sells. Yeah. That's what keeps us engaged.
Yeah. People do not want to feel discomfort. So they're going to run away from that as fast as they can to whatever the perceived comfort is. Sometimes it's not really comfort at all, right? It's really bad. So we just have to figure out when you start taking control of your emotions and think of emotions as energy and motion. Every negative emotional state, Ron, every emotional state that's negative, there's one thing in common. You know what that is?
Go on.
One common denominator. You don't breathe. Try to be angry and breathe. You can't, because, we all have, like I have grandsons now. When my kids were younger, I wasn't so visual, but now with grandkids, when Eli comes up and he's all mad, if I say, just breathe, what's going to happen is he's going to get angrier because he knows if he starts breathing, he will lose that anger and he wants to own it with righteous indignation. He owns that, and so some people, they don't realize that, or depression, anxiety, all these negative states, they're all energy that is no longer in motion. We're designed to process the world. So there's two factors that I always tell people with brain fitness, two factors that really motivate the upregulating or downregulating of your epigenetic system. So what we're showing here is that your thoughts don't just control 3,200 gene expressions. They control every biological marker in your body through two portals. Number one is, do you look at life as a threat? If you do, they've shown in science that you downregulate your DNA so that you express at a lower level. You actually downregulate. If you look at life as a challenge, you actually upregulate. Now, some of the listeners might be saying, how can they measure that? Every cell has mitochondria in it. Mitochondria's job is to absorb and transmit light energy. So this isn't metaphysics. This is science. So this is all, so some people think it's metaphysics, but really every cell operates on an energetic level. So, when you meet a friend of yours that's what we call a gainer, somebody that makes you feel good, you get energized when you're with them. And then, if you're like me and you're in practice on Friday afternoon at 5 o'clock, that drainer comes in, the one that they're Debbie Downer, no matter what's going on in their life. By the time they leave, you feel like they ripped off all your energy and you got to go, what happened? Well, there are energy vampires out there. They rob you of your energy because this mitochondria, literally, they've proven in science that we absorb energy and we transmit energy. So you want to be a gainer and you want to disassociate as much as possible. Now, some of them are family members, so you can't really get rid of them. They're gonna hang around. But the reality is that you get to choose who you are. The old saying, if you're around three Catholics, you could become the fourth. If you're around 3 alcoholics, you could become the fourth. If you're around 3 drug users, you could become the fourth. If you're around 3, fans of soccer, you could become the fourth fan, even if you didn't like soccer before. But if 3 of your friends are doing it, pretty soon you start learning the lingo, you start doing your thing, because that old saying, birds of a feather flock together. And because we are learning, even over the airwaves here where we're talking, you are transmitting light energy. That's why I see you. It's a scientific fact. The camera's picking up your light reflexes. My brain is interpreting it, and I have an image of you. And it's not really out there anymore. It's in here. So everything that happens to us happens in here. And then how do we interact with it? And so a lot of times that interaction is so stressful, we don't express in a way because we hold our breath. Most people, the listeners, you should today, when you go to your next meal, just don't say anything to your family. Just watch them. Even at dinner, they'll be holding their breath. They don't realize it. We got to learn to breathe again. And that's one of the key things to brain fitness. And then making good choices. There's a saying that you can either plan on succeeding or you can count on failure, because your best thinking brought you here. I want to congratulate everybody on this podcast. You're here with Dr. Ron. You're learning something new and different. You're challenging your brain. You're building up what's called neuroplasticity. And if you hear the right things and you have that aha moment, you go, wow, that was something I wanted to remember. And you have that spark of, that aha moment. We know that's when your neurons fired together, wired together, and your whole brain had to rewire around that one new thought. So when I get up in the morning, my first thing is what new thought am I going to have today? Because I want my brain to rewire, because my brain of yesterday doesn't do me any good today. That was yesterday's brain. I want a new brain. And people go, what do you mean by that? Well, I live on a river here in Newburgh, North Carolina in the U.S. And when I look out at that river, it's called the Neuse River. And when I look at it, it looks the same as it did yesterday. But the reality is it's not the same river. There's new water there. There's new fish in there. The sediment in the bottom has changed. That's not the same river. That's why the ancients said you can never step into the same river twice. By the time we're done with this podcast, everyone listening is going to realize you never wake up in the same body. So why would you bring the old memories, the old concepts, the old beliefs into a new experience? I call these the dragons of the past, because people drag them on and drag them on and drag them on. And they try to convince all their family members and their friends, poor me, this is what's happening to me. But I believe that whatever happened to you, that's your proving ground to get your superpowers. Until you earn, if you're Superman and kryptonite's going to harm you, why would you carry it around in your pocket and show everybody it? What you do is you put it in a lead box, put it in the backyard and bury it. You don't want to tell people about it. The more you tell people about your kryptonite, the more power you give to that kryptonite. So part of brain fitness is, what are you thinking about, you bring about? So what are you focusing on in your day-to-day life? And I'm sure we're going to get into more things, but this is when we think about brain fitness, it's an active experience. You become an active participant in your life. You become actively catching these thoughts, because there's no meditation process. I wish I had a magic wand I could wave it past and all negative thoughts would leave your mind, but we do need negative thoughts. They stop us from doing certain things, but we don't need them to run our whole life. We need them to be guardrails, not guiding lights, I said.
Something we talk a lot about on the program, and I do professionally when I consult, is positive intelligence. And there's a tipping point, and it's said to be a tipping point of around, 3 positive thoughts to every 1 negative thought, if you like.
Yes.
And yet, for most of us, that's flipped over. As you say, the internal conversation that goes on in our heads can be a positive thing or a negative thing. It can work for us or against us. And sadly, as we're bombarded by so much negativeness, it's part of the business model. Yeah. I think that's important to understand. It's so critically important for us to take control of it and step outside of that business model, which is why I was so looking forward to talking to you. I know you talk a lot about light and sound and how it can actually retrain the brain.
Yeah.
And I love that. And before we get onto that, I think it's worth reminding our listeners that the energy system in our body is called the electron transport chain.
Yes. Yes.
It's not called the carbohydrate transport chain, the protein carbohydrate chain, or the fat. It's called the electron transport chain. And all those little organelles called mitochondria are doing their work, very complex, I know. This is about energy. This is about energy and controlling that energy. Let's go on. This is exciting for me, Patrick, even though it's 7 o'clock in the morning for me, and I know it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon for you. But tell me, how can light and sound actually retrain the brain?
Sure. So when you think about if you and I were to measure the brain, we would have to use electrodes because it's only a low level. But when those cells start recruiting and they start vibrating together because of the energy, your brain has the most mitochondria. So every cell could have up to 200 mitochondria. And so imagine every time that imagine I'm in the middle of one of those mitochondria, and every time I spin around, every time I hit 12 o'clock, I spit out something called ATP. This is the energy system of the body, right? So what they've proven, if I can introduce light therapy to you, the right doses of light, that cell will absorb, the hemoglobin absorbs the light therapy and drives it into the cell. If that cell is about to die, that cell will actually attract that energy, and it will then start what's called the Krebs cycle. Now, when it does that, instead of spitting out one ATP molecule, now the brain is making 32. So imagine you have an electric vehicle and you're charging it and it takes you 32 minutes. Now you can charge that electric vehicle in 1 minute. Remember I said everybody was born with 18.1 volts. That's an energy equation. Everything in life is an energy equation. You know, when you really boil it down, how much energy does your brain have? So when we talk about how do we increase voltage and energy, when we introduce this light, it's not just light though. What we do is we introduce light at certain frequencies because our body, if you and I were to be walking along the ocean and we sit down and we start to relax just naturally because we're near the ocean, it's not just a coincidence. It's because our body has an evoked potential with the ocean, which the ocean or all bodies of water have 10 hertz frequency, they have potential. What I mean is they are vibrating frequencies. Everything in the universe is vibrating and teeming with energy and frequency. So when we sit there, our mirror neurons mirror those frequencies. So in ancient times, we didn't go into the cave all day and pound rocks together like a computer. You know, we were outside. We'd walk through the forest. A forest also is 10 hertz frequency. Almost everything in nature that we would live in would be at 10 hertz frequency. Now, think of 10 hertz frequency as the alpha brainwave path, but it's also neutral for the brain. So what it would do is it would engage certain neurotransmitters, which are those really, they're little electrical impulses at the end of dendrites that cause the connections to happen and all the communication in the brain to happen. But as we go through our day, those get depleted. But in ancient times, we wouldn't work 14 hours. You didn't go out hunting and gathering for 14 hours. You'd go out for maybe 6 to 8 hours. And maybe 3 times a week, you met up with a life-threatening experience that caused you to be stressed out. And then what you would do is you'd run back to the fire at the end of the day and you'd all talk about it. But what most people don't understand is that fire was actually biohacking. Just like they do today, these biohackers. That fire actually also has a 10 hertz frequency. So that fire, if somebody's been by the fire and they're looking at it and go, I'm mesmerized by that fire. Well, that's because that fire is crackling and burning at 10 hertz frequency. But another benefit to that fire is it's giving off infrared light. So now when they're there, it's down regulating the nervous system. And one thing about the ancients, they didn't go, you know what, that log's about to burn out. Go get us a couple more logs. I want to binge watch these logs. They didn't do it like television shows, right? What they did was they said, those logs burned out, let's go to bed, because they down-regulated their system. So in our world today, what we do is we flip to the next TV show or listen to the next whatever it is. And then, of course, we trip cortisol, dopamine, and norepinephrine and all those things that wake us up. And then we got a little kick again. Now we're up for another hour, and we don't realize that we have to prepare our brains for sleep. So when we use light, what we found out, and we did this in 1986, so this isn't something new, but in 1986, when we developed the first portable light and sound machine, we were looking at sound.
Portable, hang on, Patrick, hang on. Portable?
Light and sound machine. It was called the MC square. Yeah, we called it the MC because we liked Einstein. So we called it the MC square. So people would put it on and it would train their brains to go into alpha and theta. And we didn't have delta at that time. We didn't know we could put people to sleep. You know, we found all this out when we could measure it. When people say to me, did you go to school for neuropsychology? I go, there was no neuropsychology. We did biofeedback, right? We were looking at skin temperature, respiration, heart rate, these kind of things. So what we were looking at is we would put people, and we'd use GSR, galvanic skin response systems, which are still available on Amazon. They can train you. You put your fingers on them and you, like me, you set it to 10 hertz or you set it to 7 hertz. And what you do is it gives off a little beeping sound, but it's your biology it's measuring, not your brain. Now we have neurofeedback where we can measure the brain frequencies. So what we were doing was we were trying to get people out of pain. And listeners out there, you probably think you have pain in your body from time to time. That's really not true. You have a disruption in the body, but the pain happens in the brain. That's why people can have phantom limb pain. You know, like when I work with veterans or somebody who had a amputation, but they still have pain in their fingers or toes. They don't have any fingers or toes because the brain is still sending the signal, even though there's nothing there. So we were working on those type of people, you know, in the lab. And so what we did was we started with candles. And we noticed that when they would meditate to a candle, their pain would go away.
Interesting.
But the problem is you can't move a candle's flickering. It only flickers at 10 hertz. So now we can introduce LEDs. Now, a light emitting diode can be very structured. Now, when we look out at the sun, a lot of people don't realize that sun is actually beaming codes into our body. Also, you have within you right now receptors that are called DNA receptors. And your DNA is a viscous material that they now know in science that it absorbs light energy and transmits codes to the body. So what I mean by that is, and by the way, if I was to take yours, Ron, and staple your DNA to the floor, it would reach to Pluto. That's inside you right now. And back in 2003, when they said, hey, we mapped the human genome, woo! And then they said, you know what? It's only 1% of it we mapped, the other 99% is junk, because they couldn't measure it, right? In 2018, they actually have science now that says that 99% is actually useful data that either upregulates or downregulates your DNA pairs every 40 seconds or so. So think about that. Every 40 seconds, you are adapting to your environment. And the cells in your body, just to give people perspective, 50 million cells per second are changing. So when you think about that, you are in a constant state of flux. You are not the same person. In fact, there's a saying that you've died thousands of times before you got here because your body's no more than 7 years old. So you're not the person that was born. You're physiologically a totally new person over and over again, depending on, for me, quite a few times, you know, so here I am. But we still have the same memories, the same beliefs, the same concepts. So that's what we're talking about, upgrading and keeping up with the times. So what they know with DNA is that, and I'm just going to use the sun as an example, but it's every star system, every communication. We are part of the whole galaxy. There's nothing separate. You cannot separate the sunlight from the sun. You can't separate a wave from the ocean. We are all part of the same one system. But what the sun does, just for an example, every day at 2 o'clock, something happens to every person on Earth in their time zone around 2 o'clock. Their temperature drops 2 degrees everywhere in the world in their time zone at 2 o'clock. This is because our body is designed to have a biological reset. Everything is cyclic in the known universe. It's either growing or it's decaying. It's never staying the same. Nothing stays the same. So what happens at that time is a lot of people run out and get coffee, tea, and sugar and whatever. But the body's actually saying, let's go to sleep, because every body, which I mean these physical bodies, is derived from the same place. And that place is the Serengeti. And Ron, what happens at 2 o'clock in the Serengeti? Absolutely nothing. It's too hot. Everybody goes to sleep. But what we do is we push through it. We go get a coffee. We go get a tea. We go get some cookies. We go get some chocolate. And we push through it biologically because we think we're biological beings. We're not. We have a biological system, of course, but it's controlled by that electron support chain, like you said. It's controlled by our electrical system. You are a light being. And that's not a metaphysical concept that I need to put on my bumper on my car. It's a reality that at the cellular level, you are light and you're transmitting energy. Now that sun is not only beaming that code at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, at 2 a.m. in the morning, wherever you're at in the world, your temperature is going to increase 2 degrees. That's why if you wake up and you're sweating, that's telling you that your nervous system is not balanced. Your brain is out of balance because your brain is actually 70% of your nervous system. Everybody thinks the nervous system is this body. It's not. Your nervous system is your brain. It turns on and off 2 very important systems, and it monitors a third. The 2 very important systems are the parasympathetic and sympathetic. But the one that most people are so concerned with, they take supplements with it, they worry about it, is what we call the neurohormonal system. That's our physiology. We're just learning about our physiology. Imagine this, Ron. In 2015, a doctor doing a sleep study finds out that we have a whole new system of the body. Before 2015, every physiology book in the world, the lymphatic system stops at the neck. Well, if you're like me and you went to school and you took physiology and they said, hey, the lymph system, anywhere there's a blood vessel, there is a lymph vessel, and the lymph system is like the garbage man of the system. But then you look at the physiology book and they all stop at the neck because they didn't realize only during level 4 sleep does this part of the body operate. It kicks on in short bursts. So that's why when you sleep, you go through these cycles of sleep. And when you reach deep level 4 sleep, this lymphatic vessels open up and you go offline. If any listener out there has ever woke up at night and couldn't move, they call it sleep paralysis. You woke up in the middle of a cleaning cycle. Imagine you're at the Ford Motor Company and they're getting ready to clean the line. You know, they're not going to let the workers work while they clean the line. You got to shut the line off while they clean it, then turn the line back on so they can build on it. So our body does the same thing. So that's just one system of the body. And like I said, in 2018, they found out that this genetic system, this epigenetic system, they call it, it changes every 40 seconds. What else don't they know about our physiology? We think we know everything, but we don't know everything because we're living in a whole new world today than we were before. And by the way, the listeners, if you don't get to sleep by 10 o'clock in your time zone, you don't make as much melatonin. If you don't get to bed by 11, you don't clean your liver, and your liver controls 300 functions of your brain.
Hi, Dr. Ron here, and I want to invite you to join our Unstress Health community. Now, like this podcast, it's independent of industry and focuses on taking a holistic approach to human health and to the health of the planet. The two are inseparable. There are so many resources available with membership, including regular live Q&As on specific topics with special guests, including many with our amazing Unstress Health advisory panel. Now, we've done hundreds of podcasts, all worth listening to, with some amazing experts on a wide range of topics. Many are world leaders. But with membership, we have our Unstress Lab podcast series, where we take the best of several guests and carefully curate specific topics for episodes which are jam-packed full of valuable insights. So join the Unstress Health community. If you're watching this on our YouTube channel, click on the link below or just visit unstresshealth.com to see what's on offer and join now. I look forward to connecting with you.
Patrick, you know, when my kids were younger, I mean, we never went to bed before 12 o'clock. And I can only, as you say that, I just am horrified by what I was doing to myself, although instinctively, as in recent years, I'm in bed by 9 or 10 o'clock. So this is music to my ears. And I'm loving what you're saying. It's head spinning stuff because there's so much you're saying there. And I know we're going to get onto the story, but I just want to back up a little bit because, you know, you talk about we're an electronic being. We live in an electronic world.
Yes.
And yet in the last 100 years, we have so fundamentally changed that world by bombarding ourselves, literally with our devices in our pockets, right by our heads in bed, bathing our houses in Wi-Fi radiation. We're told it's all perfectly safe as long as it doesn't warm up. It's measured by temperature, but it's not. You're talking about us, which is as an electronic being, and yet we're so cavalier about the impact that all of this electricity and particularly personal devices have on us. I can only imagine what that's doing. That's a whole can of worms, isn't it?
Yeah, I'll give people, because people don't understand that and they don't believe it. If that was true, our government would take care of us. Well, I guess they're living on Mars or something. Our government could care less. As long as they're getting their pockets lined, they approve whatever is out there. So what I want people to do, in America, we have a home goods store that's called Home Depot or Lowe's, and you can go there and you can actually measure yourself on what's called a volt-ohm-meter. And what I recommend people do, or if you have a friend that's in electronics or electrician, ask them to bring over their volt-ohm-meter. And you can find out, most people are running around with 4 to 8 volts of energy coursing through their body. Now, that should be 0. So when you take off your shoes, take that same volt-ohm-meter, take off your shoes, go outside and touch the earth, you'll be at 0. Because our body is these frequencies. Imagine we're used to frequencies between 0.5 and 100 that instruct our brain, that will actually change our brain function from being in alpha, beta, theta to gamma to delta. These are frequencies. And at night we have slow rhythm information because we're getting that light from the sun. We're getting the light reflected from the moon to us. It's changing the frequency to get us to downregulate and go to sleep. That's one of the functions of the moon, and it does this without us knowing it. We don't have to subscribe to it. It's something we get to do while we're born. But if we're not grounding, like if you're at my office right now, I'm standing up, I have a grounding mat under my keyboard because I'm standing in front of a generator of electricity that's beaming frequencies to me that unless I do something to ground them into the earth, my body is going to have to deal with them. Now, what does that do to the body? Remember I said we were being beamed codes that tell our body what to do. Well, inside the cells, there's also codes. There's codes within codes within codes. It's not like there's not just one master code. We can't just change one code. But the body kind of works like, and I always recommend people go to the internet again and go to YouTube and look up synchronizing metronomes. And there's a guy there that sets up 200 metronomes. He starts them at all the same time, and they all synchronize within 3 minutes. Science still does not know why that happens. Now, every cell does the same thing all the time. When you're in groups of people, it does the same thing. That's why if you're at a sporting event and they say that there's that mojo that people have, they go, the mojo's on this team's back, that team's back, because that energy is there and we all get into sync. And then if something bad happens, we get out of sync, we get into sync. It's always happening all the time. Nothing's fixed. But in the cells of our body, if we're getting hit by let's say somebody you're living your life great, then they decide to put a 5G tower right down the road from you, or worse yet, across the street. Well, that's beaming 50 million pulses per second. And your cells are trying to figure out, what am I supposed to do with this information? It's not good or bad. It's just the body does not know what to do with it. It's never seen anything. And people think, wow, well, we've had these things for a long time. No, we haven't. These bodies have been around for 200,000 years and they really haven't changed. They have no idea what this is because in the scope of time that we've lived, even if we took, you look at your computer screen right now, and if that represented all the electronic information in the universe, we only occupy not even a hair's breadth of that, but we're still getting all the other frequencies. And the way that I put this in perspective with people, when I was in school, we actually would build radios with potatoes. And I'm going to tell you how to do it. It's very easy. You go to your electronics store.
We digress, but go on.
Yes. You get a little crystal that represents your radio station. In my town, it was KNIR when I was growing up. They sold these little crystals. They had 3 little prongs. You put it in the potato. You put a speaker with wires in the potato. And like magic, you would start to receive our radio station. Because that radio station is broadcasting a frequency that carries energy. But if you don't have the crystal to pick it up, it just goes right through you. These bodies are like the crystal of that radio station. So if you have positive thoughts, positive imagery, positive intention, eating positive foods, I call it frequencies. So the listeners can kind of think of this. What do you frequently see? That's your frequency. If you're a high frequency person, you see high frequency foods, high frequency activities, high frequency opportunities. If you're low frequency, You see low frequency foods, low frequency people, low frequency opportunities. The two don't see the same thing, even though they're in the same space, the same time, but they're tuned into a different frequency. And it's just like tuning your radio or your TV. Now we have boxes and we have satellites that can get us hundreds of thousands of different stations or whatever. But the reality is all those stations are beaming through us right now. But our human brain can't, get them. We have to have an external device that does it. But in the universal scope of things, our brain has been picking up frequencies and signals just like a radio station would since the dawn of history. They did a study that proved DNA, and they did it with a duck, if you believe it or not. What they did was they had a duck, and they had that duck get hatched by a chicken. Because some people say that wherever you live, that does play a big role, of course, in your growing up and what you do. But they wanted to see what would happen. Well, as soon as that duck was born as a chicken, it immediately walked away from the chicken and found a stream to go wade in and act like a duck. Because we now know the Hopi Indians here in America have a saying that 7 generations of their ancestors are guiding them. Well, right now, neurophysiologists have proven, they used to say 7 generations, which is kind of spooky because here's the Hopi Indians saying it years ago, and then we got our side. But now they say 54 generations. I think it's since the very beginning of time. It's inside us. We just can't trigger it. That doesn't mean it's not there and influencing us. That's why if you have a family history of anxiety and stress and worry, even they go, well, my mom was a worrier, that's why I'm a worrier. Well, yeah, you're picking up that frequency. Until you change it, you're going to be affected by it because 95% of what's happening to you right now is not your conscious mind. So many people spend all their time on their conscious mind when it's in the back of the bus and Freddy Krueger's driving. You need to kick Freddy Krueger off the bus. That's why we say you have to do brain fitness. You have to train. And when we talk about catching those thoughts, like you talked about, when I tell people when a negative thought comes up, you say the word, this is just one technique, but you say the word stop. And you say, stop giving it energy, stop giving it time. And then you think of 3 new thoughts you'd like to put in there, just like you said. That's one of the strategies. Because if you do something once, it could be an accident. You do something twice, now you created the dilemma. But if you create it 3 times, now your brain has to create something called the neural pathways possibilities, because your brain uses the Fibonacci sequence to build all straight. When you talk about light, sound, and vibration, when your body is building those new neural pathways, they always do it once. And if you do it once again, it says, okay, you did it once again. We got to be aware of it. But if you do it the 3rd time quickly, that's why spaced repetition is so important. If you do it within the next 72 hours, your brain goes, wait a minute, this is something I better build a strategy around. So now those neurons recruit other neurons, neural networks, and you start to think about, oh, if that stop sign comes up because I'm a new driver, now I know I need to slow down and stop. Or, if I see, we always use the example of policemen because, nobody wants to see a policeman when you're driving, only when you're broke down, right? So if you're driving down the road and you're just minding your own business and all of a sudden the police come behind you and they turn on their siren and they turn on their lights, you're immediately going to think something went wrong. What did I do wrong? Was I speeding? Are my lights out? What's happening? And you go to pull over, and before you know it, that policeman goes around you. And you go, whew, you actually feel like you got away with something. But you didn't do anything in the first place. Because what you did was you recruited all those neural networks, all those programs that run when you see a policeman. Just like if you were in the mall or a shopping center and you saw a good friend that you haven't seen in years, the closer you get to them, the more you smile, the more energy you have. You're ready to give them a hug because this is now if you see that negative person, you're like, oh my God, what am I going to do? I got to get out. Your brain's doing all of that without you knowing it. Because if your conscious mind could really control it, we probably wouldn't be talking right now. These are all happening in the background of your brain. Or your subconscious or your mind. I don't think the brain, the hardware is the same as the mind, the software. The mind, and just so the listeners know, here in America, there's something called the NIH, the National Institute of Health. And most of the time they're trying to kill us. It seems, what they're doing because they're into a lot of prescription medicine, doing these things. But there's a whole nother branch of them that's all about positive thinking, healthy choices that are non-pharmaceutical, non-biological. They're, whether it's coaching or acupuncture or something like that. And they actually have on their website, if you go there and you type in biosphere, you'll see that in 1994, They put out a page on their website that said, every living individual has a biosphere and all illness starts in this field. That's amazing because everybody thinks, now I don't know why they want to give a pharmaceutical when they realize it's an electronic problem. It's all about how do we recruit and harmonize the cells like Dr. Reif would do. He would send a frequency into the body that would be the healthy cell. The cancer cell would leave or it would actually blow up. Because that cancer cell was actually like one of those metronomes. It was trying to get other cells to be recruited into its frequency. So if we can keep the right frequency, it's going to make a difference.
Yeah. So, gee, Patrick, so much you have said there, and the whole energy program or world that we live in sets us up. It literally sets us up because the model of ill health is worth a lot of money and it's built into almost every aspect of our lives. And this is why I was so looking forward to talking to you because we are bombarded by so much radiation. We are bombarded by so much news. We are, it's very difficult. It's part of the business model. And I love this idea of taking control of your own health because really, unless you're buying into the system, then that's your only alternative, to take control of your own health. So tell us what BrainTap is, what's the science behind it, and how do we know it works?
Right. Well, we have many studies. I'll just give you a few examples of those studies. We've done studies in Australia, actually, in Burnaby, Australia. And I'll tell you about that study first. So how we know it works, we went out to the coal mines. Because these are people that don't sleep. They don't have what's called the circadian rhythm. They go to work in the dark. They sleep in the dark. They get up. They just don't see the light of the sun. So people said, well, this would be a good one to do a sleep study on. So what we did was we measured them with what they call 𝗘𝗽𝗓 devices, watches. They would measure their sleep. And what we found out was the average coal miner spent 10 hours a night in bed. Now that seems like it's good, but the reality is they only got 1 minute of deep sleep and 2 minutes or less of REM sleep. Now, what you need to have a good sleeping score is an hour of deep sleep and 2 hours of REM sleep. The deep sleep is to detoxify the brain. The REM sleep is to compartmentalize, organize, because most people don't realize you do more neurological activity at night while you're sleeping than when you're awake. Your brain is actually more active when you're sleeping. So if you're still one of those people that brags that you only have to sleep 4 hours a night or 5 hours a night, that's not good. You're going to pay the piper sooner or later. You need, they say in longevity studies, at least 6.5 hours is the average. But the reality is it's a math problem. You need to have 1 hour of deep sleep, 2 hours of REM sleep. If you're getting that if you could do that in 4 hours, like they do in the military, because when the military did their studies, they said these kids that are 18 to 25 years old, they can get away with 4 hours of sleep. I mean, in college, I got away with 0 sleep sometimes, because not that I planned it that way. It's just, things were happening, and I didn't sleep, but I did a lot of things I would never do again now that I know what my brain would do in college. So, but what we did was then when we put them on the program, BrainTap is a pair of headset. You can go there to braintap.com. You can see it. And there's a headset that looks like virtual reality, but it's not virtual reality. It's actually LED lights that are flickering at certain frequencies that mimic nature. So it's going to take you from, let's say, 18 cycles per second down into alpha, maybe into 6 or 7 hertz frequency, and back up into, now between alpha and beta, there's a brainwave that's called SMR, sensory motor rhythm. This is a brainwave that we showed that if you train it, it actually builds better balance than doing balancing physical exercises. Because what does your muscles and ligaments do? Nothing until the brain tells it to do it. And it does it by recruiting this brainwave called SMR, sensory motor rhythm. So we showed that now if you do them together, it's even better. If you do a physical activity and you do a mental process. So with what we did with the coal miners is we showed that within 3 weeks of using the system 3 times a day, and the reason 3 times a day is important at first is in the morning, most people don't wake up correctly. They actually use an alarm clock. That's probably the worst thing you can do for your nervous system. And I'm going to tell you why. When you hear an alarm go off, now, if you use an alarm and you have beautiful music, that's a different story. I'm talking about the blaring alarm that scares the heck out of you and you don't know where you're at. You're just arriving back from wherever we go when we sleep. You hear that blaring alarm. Now, what happens is the liver at that moment is holding 25 grams of sugar called glucagon. That sugar gets released into the bloodstream while you're in bed. There's no lion chasing you. You're not in a stressful situation, but now your body has to recruit that insulin. So now the insulin fires up. Now your body's in fat storage mode before you got out of bed. You just had a candy bar, but you didn't leave the bed. So you're chasing cortisol, you're chasing sugar all day long. Now, the average American, I don't know about New Zealand or Australia, but here the average person hits their alarm clock 3 times. So that means 75 grams of sugar gets dumped into their bloodstream. They just ate breakfast before they got out of bed. No one I know has a sugar deficiency because our liver, our body is capable of producing all the sugar we need. Now, if we don't control that stress response, so we recommend in the morning doing training. We have training that's only 10 minutes long. And the breath work we want you to do is something called psychological breathing. And how you do that is you breathe in, you just take a deep breath and go, and then you go, Now, you might not want to do that at the breakfast table. They might think you're crazy. But if you can do that in your bedroom when you're alone, do 2 to 3 minutes of that, you're going to upregulate the nervous system. Because in the morning, we have something called the cortisol trough. And this is your body. You should not need coffee first thing in the morning. You should wait 2 hours. Because if you have coffee first thing in the morning, you just crush that cortisol trough. Because you just biologically put something in the system that the electrical system is designed to do. And the brain uses 20% of the energy. So if it can offload the work to something else, it will do it. You'll become dependent upon coffee. Now, it takes about 2 weeks to become...
Which is a whole industry.
Yes. So if you want to have coffee, I think that's fine, but have it 2 hours after awakening. And it won't have that same effect. Your brain is already kick-started. So that's the first thing in the morning. That morning session is actually going to help you sleep better. Because let's say you wake up and just use an analogy of you want to drive across my river. So you leave my place and you want to go straight across, but you're 10 degrees off because of stress and anxiety. You have to fix 2 things to really be healthy. You have to fix your stress and you have to fix your sleep. So if you don't fix those 2 things, it doesn't matter what else you do. You won't metabolize, digest as good supplements you're taking. Your exercise won't work as well. Nothing will work as well until you fix those 2 things. So that's the main thing. So in the morning, we want to fix that. If you're on target and you realize you're on target, you'll get right across the way. Now, remember at 2:00 in the afternoon, what we did with the coal miners is we actually set up in the doorway of the coal mine. They let us set up 4 chairs, and the coal miners would take a break in the afternoon, and they would do one of our 20-minute reboot sessions. And we had about 38 coal miners in the study. And by the way, we only chose those 38 because they would stop drinking during the study. A lot of them thought that drinking was going to help them sleep, even though we showed them that when you drink alcohol before bed, you don't start the sleep cycle for almost 6 hours into the sleep. So that's why we recommend not drinking alcohol 2 hours before sleep and not drinking more than 1 drink every hour if you're going to drink. If you're going to have a drink, have it early and maybe have some fiber with it or some protein, something to slow down that sugar so it doesn't affect the brain so much. And so we got 38 of them to not drink. So we did the study with them because drinking will hijack the brain. Really it's sugar that's hijacking the brain. So we had them do the reboot session in the middle of the day. Now, what we did with that middle of the day session here in the United States, we did a study with 𝗗𝗿, who did a peak performance study with Google and Microsoft. And what we showed them, if they do that middle of the day session, they actually got 26% more work done. Wow. Imagine that. By taking a 20-minute break for the week, you got a day and a quarter more work done by taking 20 minutes off. And then their happiness score improved 54%. Their sleep scores improved over 71% from that one session. Because think of every cell of your body, it holds onto energy. What BrainTap does through light, sound, and vibration, it liberates that energy. And you start, because we use light in the ears. And a lot of people go, why do you have lights in the ears? Well, in your ears, you have junction points. In Chinese, have something called acupuncture. Now in America, there's Dr. Nogier. He created something called iridology. It's the same thing. It's just one uses the ear, one uses the whole body, one just uses the ear. And you can use seeds and needles and sound. So we chose light. So our light actually flickers at different frequencies in the ear. Now, consciously, you don't know that's going on. But if you've ever seen the movie with Dustin Hoffman, Rain Man, where they knock the toothpicks on the ground. He goes 1,243 or whatever. And how did he do that? He counted them. We can all do that. Our brain's very good at filtering things out, but that's not useful for us, so we don't do it. But if you're someone like, he was a highly functioning, autistic, and he could do it. There are people that can do that. So in the middle of the day, you want that reboot. Now, the reason that you want to do a down regulation at night, and about 90% of our BrainTap users will do it at night. Now, let me tell you about the breath in the middle of the day, though, since I talked about the breath in the morning so people understand that. In the middle of the day, we do what's called box breathing. And every special forces around the world uses this. So imagine you're one of these special teams, you're one of 6 people, and you're going to go take on that battleship. I'm sure no matter what front-facing, how strong you think you are and how tough you are, there's going to be some fear going on there. You know, the odds are not stacked in your favor, although you've been trained to think you're invincible and you can dodge bullets and, you know, you're Superman in disguise. What they did is, now box breathing is very easy for the listener. What you do, and you can do this at stoplights, you can do this where you're at the doctor's office, you can do it at home during commercials. What you do is you breathe into the count of 4, you hold that breath for the count of 4, you breathe out to the count of 4, you hold that breath out for the count of 4, that's the box. And you continue that process for 2 to 3 minutes. What it does is it will regulate the sympathetic, parasympathetic, and neurohormonal system. And as I said earlier, those 3 systems control everything about your physiology. If any of those are out of balance, you're going to have an illness or a distress in the body that's going to have to be dealt with. So this will regulate the body. Now at night, before you go to sleep, we have sessions that actually down-regulate. They start about 14 cycles per second. In every one of our sessions, we have over 3,000 sessions, and we have about 500 that are just music only, so you don't have to listen to somebody's voice if you don't want to. But these train the brain, like we have one for better sleep that we only have 5 of them because we find that when people even download our 14-day free trial, within 3 days, they're having their best night's sleep because we've trained the brain again. Your brain knows.
Now, Patrick, let me just stop you here because I think you're assuming everybody knows what you are talking about because it is a device that fits over the ears and the eyes, is it not?
Yes. And we also have an app. So they can go to braintap.com and download the app for free for 14 days. So we already recommend that that's the first step people do because you'll start getting results with just the app alone. Like in the study we did in Australia there, when we had the 73% improvement in sleep in 3 weeks, that was with the headset. The group that was just using the app alone, it took them 6 weeks to do it, but they still got there because sound, like light, even the Bible, when they spoke, let there be light. Because everything, when you think about sound is converted in the body by the electron support chain, right? Transfer chain into light energy, just like electricity. And so you can use sound to do that. That's why if we go to a party and we really didn't want to be there, but they're playing our favorite music, we start tapping our toes, we want to dance because that ATP is still being produced. It's just not being produced at the highest level. That's why if you go to a rock concert, they got the lights going, they got everything, they want to get your energy up. Or you go to a ball game, and they got the lights and they got the light and sound. They're doing it for a different reason than we are, but they're still doing it to excite you, to get your body going. So at night, the process, and this is one for the listeners. If you do nothing else from this podcast, before you go to bed tonight, while you're lying in bed, I want you to breathe into the count of 4. You're going to trigger that sympathetic system, that fight or flight. You might have a little fear come up. That's okay. You have to deal with those thoughts. So think about all those thoughts you haven't thought about because they're scary and they make you upset and angry. They're still sitting there. If you don't deal with them, whatever you resist persists. So you need to, now think of those thoughts now as wind through an open window. You can think about them, but you let them go. Let them go. But you have to think about them because they're like trapped behind a dam, like the water would be. You got to let that go. So when you count to 4, you're going to trigger the sympathetic system. Then you're going to breathe out to the count of 8. When you breathe out to the count of 8, you instruct the body to release the tension and stress in the body. And as you do it, you're turning on what's called the parasympathetic system. And if you do that, this is exercising. This is true brain fitness. You're training the brain through breath work. All these breath exercises are training the brain to do something. So we have these in BrainTap, so we guide you, but you could do this on your own. And then what I recommend you do is as you breathe in, as you get good at this, you breathe in and you think about what happened to you today. Was it good or bad, ugly? Was it nice? Did you have good memories, bad memories? Any good memories, I want you to make them colorful and bright and relive them just like you'd put together a photo album. These are the ones you want to keep. Any negative thing that happened to you today, and by the way, there's going to be negative things that happen. Don't be surprised. I mean, the world, when like we have a boxer here named Mike Tyson, he always says, everybody has a plan till they get hit. You're going to get hit with stress. Something's going to happen. Don't be surprised. Just say, okay, how did I handle it? Did you handle it correctly? Did you make good decisions? Did you run to food or alcohol, drugs, whatever? If you did something negative, it's okay. Don't beat yourself up. You can't, if I could go back in time, I'd change a lot of things. I can't go back in time. I only did what I did. I did the best that I could with the information I had. So you basically want to forgive yourself. Shame doesn't help you. Guilt doesn't help you. Negative emotions don't serve you. Now, you don't want to keep doing them, right? So that's where you think of 3 different ways you want to do it differently. That's when you start to use that, we call that neurogenesis. We cannot reclaim the cells or the neurons that we lost, but we can build new ones. So as we think of new opportunities, new challenges, new things we do, we can become our own gardener for our brain. We can pull the weeds of discontent and we can plant the seeds of greatness every night. Now, what will happen is the brain, and I call these rituals, not habits, because so many people think of habits as negative. But if you have a ritual each night that says, I'm going to maintenance my brain, I'm going to take back control. I did the best I could. This is what happened to me. So what? Now, here's how I'm going to change it. What will happen is then you just like they say, let go and let God, or just like every great inventor. There's never been an inventor I haven't read their book about that at night they had some strategy to release the stress of the day and let new information in. Like they wanted to break through in their lab. They had a sticking point. We all have problems in our life. Don't think you're going to learn some magic wand process that's going to make your life just work for you. And I love it when people say, Patrick, I just want you to take the stress away. And I said, well, that only happens one time in your life. It's called death. You're going to have stress. And the reason we have such a powerful brain and such a wonderful life is because of stress. It's just the way we handle that stress. We should not ask to remove our stress. And in fact, I always say that, people say God doesn't give you anything you can't handle. And my wife has a t-shirt that says, God must think I'm a badass, because of the stress, she has to live with me. Think about it. So, all the things that happen. So when you think about, you can handle it, but the problem is it's not about the stress. It's about your capacity to handle that stress. So remember, think of life as a challenge. And your body will upregulate and give you the skills, resources, give you the book to read, the podcast to listen to, the mentor to go find. You will be put in the way of success when you believe that life is happening through you and not to you. And just remember that. When life happens to you, it's a very stressful experience. But when life happens through you and you realize that all of creation, and I mean all of creation, is conspiring with you for your success. You just need to be open to those. Sometimes we get an answer and we go, I don't want to do that. Well, you got to do something different. I always tell people, just do something different. You can always go back to what doesn't work. Do something different, because that creates that neurogenesis I was talking about. It creates those neural pathways. And it's all about choices. It's not about making the right decision. It's about building strategies in the mind and body that give you opportunities to make the right decision. But nobody's going to make the right decision every time, because if that was true, we'd all be multimillionaires. We'd know exactly what to do. We'd have super relationships. We're not there yet. Maybe we will be there in the future. But right now, we're dealing with a lot of our ancestral, thoughts, ideas, and concepts. And we're dealing with a world that is conspiring against us for our good. They don't care how healthy we are. And even the name of our healthcare system is wrong. It should be sick care system. It's not a healthcare system. Because when you go to the doctor, they go, you know what? You're not quite bad enough yet. Go get work, and when you come back, we can help you. It's like, what? What am I going to be healthy? You got to go to a specialist. You got to go to these other kind of practitioners that we have out there today that are looking at healthcare, because our sick care system is failing us. And people don't realize it's a racket. Even though they go, well, the insurance company wouldn't do that. They don't understand that the insurance company is being paid. They want you to be sick. They're making more money. The sicker you are, the more money they make. It's a weird structure.
Yes. No, Patrick, regular listeners to my podcast know that the healthcare system, in inverted commas, is a great economic model. It's just not a very good health model. So I think you're preaching to the converted there. But this device, I think it is interesting that as we're bombarded by so much radiation, so much electricity, so much information, so much bad news to keep us engaged, stopping, pausing, using, well, ironically, technology for good rather than for commerce, if you like. Let's put it that way. It's a great business model. It's just not a very good health model.
Right.
I think that's what I find interesting about this. Tell us, you've worked with athletes, veterans, everyday people. What results are we seeing?
Well, if you look at the world's boxing, 10 of the top world professional boxers that are top of the game right now, that are the world champions, use BrainTap. Because if you have a TBI or traumatic brain injury or concussion, there's lack of blood flow and circulation to the brain. What light therapy does is it builds vasodilation and blood flow, circulation. It improves circulation to the brain. So they're using it. We have a gentleman by the name of 𝗕𝗿 that his physical therapist, 𝗕𝗿, if you went to him in our Super Bowl, we have two different quarterbacks. They both use BrainTap because if you go to them for services, you have to have a BrainTap because they realize you can work on the physiology, but you have to work on the psychology too. And if you can do that, but in everyday use, we've done studies on sleep. We did a study actually with the pharmaceutical industry in Brazil where we always say you can't have the pill without the skill. So opioids are a big deal, right? So what we did is we did a study there that was published now where we took half the group. Now everybody got opioids because this was a medical study and they didn't believe that they couldn't do it without it. Myself, I've had painless surgery with no anesthetic. My dad trained me. I went under the knife with nothing but my brain because we have our own pharmacy. It's the world's greatest pharmacy is between your ears, 30,000 different neurochemicals with just a thought, right? So what we did in the study though, is we said, opioids are only approved for 4 weeks of use. Most people don't know that. Like SSRIs are only approved for 14 days of use. There's been no long-term studies, nothing like that. They just give them out and they just say, take them like candy. They tell you they're not going to be addictive. But what happens is your brain gets patterned for them. Then it becomes very difficult. I'm not saying anybody get off them. Go to your medical doctor and say, hey, I want to get off them. There's a way they can.
Patrick, that is a huge statement that just rolled off your tongue then. Say that again, because I think quite a few people are on SSRIs.
SSRIs are only approved for 14 days of use. They've never done any long-term studies, and they would not beat the placebo today. The placebo is a sugar pill. Placebos are 40% now, which means if they did a study today, there's never been an SSR study that was better than 30%. Because they used to say, now what they do is they can target, they know how to do a gene study, and there's a gene that's actually targeted for placebo. They actually take them out of the study, which is terrible.
Not surprising. Yeah. And opioids?
So the opioids are approved for 4 weeks of use. After that, you're supposed to get off them. So what we did in the study, this was in Florianópolis, Brazil. We did a study where after 4 weeks, our group was using the BrainTap headset during the whole study, 3 times a week in clinic, and they were doing the app at home to keep up with it. At the end of 4 weeks, we said, okay, guys, everyone off your opioids. Well, our group, 100% of them got off the opioids right away. Their brain learned how to do it without the opioids. The other group, nobody got off it. And last we checked, they're going to check for 6 months. But after the 6-week mark, every one of their people still were on opioids because they didn't have any skill. They didn't learn how to relax. Our group, of course, we gave them BrainTaps to use at home because your nervous system, I wish I had something that could change people permanently just in one shot, but the reality is that your nervous system is changing every 72 hours.
And I might add, Patrick, I might add, constantly being bombarded by a very different business model.
Yes, exactly.
That is an integral part of our economy. I hate to sound paranoid, but it's just a fact. We live in a business model, a huge business model. Yeah,
and they don't, it's not that they don't care about us. They want us to spend as much as possible. So I always tell people they keep us sick enough just enough to take all our money before we die. It's one of these crazy things, So what we have to do is we have to decide, do we want to take a short-term hit in our finances to take care of ourselves, to take back control of our health, or do we want these psychopaths to continue to govern our health, which they're not even healthy? There was a good friend of mine, a doctor here. He did a whole talk on dead doctors don't lie. The average medical doctor lives, the average emergency room doctor, I should say, only lives to 54 years old. So why would I go to him for health advice? We need to go to people that are living long and are healthy. When we measure the stress scores, and we have 3,000 clinics in America using BrainTap, so we have a lot of data. And what we find is that a lot of those doctors, before they start using BrainTap, the stress score should be about 100, but some of them are over 1,000. And we measured some that were over 3,000 in the stress index, which means they are stressed out of their gourd. They're about to pop at any time. And, the whole thing is that, again, you have to manage that stress. Once you manage the stress and you get sleeping better, then your body knows what to do. There's innate intelligence in the body. And innate intelligence would tell us to run from that bad news. Why would we tune into bad news? They search the whole world to give us 1 hour of bad news every night. You should be going to your neighbors, your friends, your family, and figuring out all the good news. There's a lot of good news happening in your community. Let's dwell on that, because that's going to be better for your epigenetics and better for your health.
Music to my ears and my listeners' ears, I know. And this has just been fantastic. Tell us, what are 3 things someone can do? We'll, of course, have links to this BrainTap and the whole site. I know it's got a lot of great information on there. What are 3 things someone can do today to start improving their brain health if they didn't have, apart from obviously getting BrainTap, but what are 3 others?
What you do if you don't have BrainTap is you would go, first thing is you get up in the morning and you make sure you hydrate your brain. And you use Celtic salt, some kind of full spectrum salt. Think of every cell like a battery in your car. If that cell doesn't have the right electrical charge, that battery is not going to fire up. And every cell of your body. Now, the reason for that is when you sleep at night, your brain shrinks 3/4 of an inch. And it shrinks that way because of toxins. So in the morning, we need to rehydrate. So think of it as a sponge. And as you're drinking that water with some salt in it, and by the way, it wouldn't hurt you to put salt in every drink you have, including coffee or tea or anything, because we're all salt deprived. And that's one of the weird things. They tell people not to have salt. But the reality is that you need salt. Most people are salt deprived. But it has to be full. Now, if you're doing table salt, like Morton salt or something, that's not going to be good. You need the salt that has at least the 12 base minerals. So what I'm saying is and it's very inexpensive. It's one of the cheapest brain hacks. The second thing you can do, because diet is so important, is when instead of every day, you should be taking at least 1 tablespoon of olive oil. Now, this is neuroprotective, and they've had studies that show your dementia risk go down 40% just by having 1 tablespoon of good olive oil. Now, I'm going to recommend you make sure it's real olive oil, because there's a lot of rancid olive oil out there. So you can go online and figure out what that is, but that's 2 things you can do. The third thing you need to do is figure out how you're going to move and breathe today. And it could be something as simple as taking a brisk walk after a meal, but you've got to get your body moving again. If you sit for more than 20 minutes, get up and move. And at first, maybe your joints aren't going to like it. But if you want to lubricate those joints and keep yourself mobile, then you've got to be moving again. And then, of course, they can use those breathing techniques we talked about on the show. Those are going to be things they can do that cost them nothing, that they're going to sleep better, they're going to reduce their stress, and they're going to thank you, Ron, for doing your podcast.
Well, Patrick, I want to thank you for joining me on that podcast and sharing with me some amazing information. We'll, of course, have links to your site. Thank you so much for joining me today and sharing your knowledge and wisdom with me.
Well, thanks for having me. It's great. I'm on a mission to better 1 billion brains. So if you're out there listening, it's your brain we're talking about. So thank you.
Well, isn't that so interesting, fascinating to observe the use of light and sound, not just light into the eyes, but into the ears. And this really goes to the subject of quantum biology, quantum physics, that our cells are capable of absorbing light, not just our eyes. That's not a surprise. Think about the impact that the sun has on our skin and on our health and well-being. So I think this is particularly interesting. We do live in a world of technology, and I thought that statistic about the 40,000 meditators was interesting, and I could relate to it, because although I know the power and the benefits of meditation, I have not been. This is an admission that may surprise many of my listeners, that even I am not perfect, and my meditation practices aren't everything they should be. And yet I am committed to technology, and I recognize the problems and challenges associated with that. So it's really a case of finding the benefits and knowing when and how to stop and start. And I think this is an interesting one. that I'm certainly going to explore, and I'll be reporting back to you on this. We'll have links to Patrick's website, which is, as we say, 𝗕𝗽𝗶𝗁𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 next time, this is Dr. Ron Ehrlich. Be well.
Feeling stressed, overwhelmed? It's time to unstress your life. Join the Unstress Health community and transform stress into strength. Build mental fitness from self-sabotage to self-mastery. And together, let's not just survive, but thrive. Expert-led courses, curated podcasts, like-minded community and support, and much more. Visit unstresshealth.com today. This podcast provides general information and discussion about medicine, health and related subjects. The content is not intended and should not be construed as medical advice or as a substitute for care by a qualified medical practitioner. If you or any other person has a medical concern, he or she should consult with an appropriately qualified medical practitioner. Guests who speak in this podcast express their own opinions, experiences and conclusions.